Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about the tyranny of plausible deniability and gaslighting. And we're going to talk about other things too. I've mentioned before that when I do this, sometimes I just pick certain topics. Gaslighting is one of my favorite because it's always involved in the gangstalking menagerie. It's always there. Plausible deniability is always there. And it's something that targets deal with constantly. There's no getting out of it. If you're dealing with the machine, the mechanism of gangstalking, you are dealing with plausible deniability, uh, a mechanism of psychological gaslighting and demonic mind control. And the gaslighting is exponential. There's no getting out of it. And I've talked about that before, that for targeted individuals, there's really no escape. For people who are experiencing higher forms of harassment, you try to change your geographical location. You try to find a different social group. You move to a different job or whatever, and it seems to be following you. And I've talked about the landscape and breaking this down logistically. Some people, well, they are dealing with a geographical scenario. They might be dealing with more of a conscious collusion than other individuals. But at the end of the day, the targets who are dealing with the higher forms of harassment, they can be dealing with everything. In fact, I was talking to a target the other night, and they asked me, why I thought that I was being gangstalked. What is this anyway? What do you think it is for you? And for targets like me, people who are experiencing higher forms of harassment, ultimately, I think it's a spiritual thing. I think that people are being used. Sometimes they're being experimented on. Sometimes they're being used like bait. And I've talked about how all targets are used in a way where people are going to get their hands dirty and they're going to attack you. And it's by design. This is designed to kill two birds with one stone. It is designed to get the individuals involved and condemn them. And it also is, for targeting people and driving them crazy, controlling them, feeding on them, experimenting on them. There's all kinds of things involved in it. And for me, excuse me, I think it's primarily a spiritual scenario. And I think that ultimately for all targets, it is. Like I said, there are people dealing with conscious collusions and government programs and things like that. Different facets of this octopus, of this machine of harassment. But ultimately, I think it comes down to that. And there's a basic framework, but it's hidden, and it's well hidden. And the reason it is because it is designed in a way that it involves the plausible deniability. It is the perfect mechanism to throw someone in where you are obfuscating illegal activity, torturing them, and you're doing it in plain sight. You're doing it in plain sight. And the people who are involved, they are surrounded by that shield of plausible deniability. And the people that do not know, who are the observers, they simply think the target is crazy, right? Or they're just a freak or something, right? And I've talked about the way that targets can become dysfunctional, and they move through this whole scenario into the place where it just solidifies the position against them. Okay, they're dealing, excuse me, with that isolation methodology. Targets are attacked and they are sensitized. They get into that place where the character assassination is in full force. There are rumors. There's all kinds of methods that are used. Sometimes false documents can be produced. Sometimes you are even dealing with things that are invisible. I've talked about the correlation effect, where when the target comes into the vicinity of people or whoever, it doesn't matter, that people are going to get agitated, whether you process that as technology or something demonic. It is used to turn people against the target. And one way or the other, that is accomplished. They are taken into that place where they are excommunicated. They are experiencing that type of stonewalling, and they're just not part of the group, and they are moved into that social dynamic framework of the scapegoat, and people just start venting on them. They are used as a pincushion. They're taken into the place where they experience the wrath of the collective. They are subjected to humiliation. The personal info that is spread around about them is amalgamated in with rumors and lies. It is taken out of context and applied to that disinformation campaign. And ultimately, as the target moves into that place where they start to slip down into the dysfunction of the mechanism, it just becomes that much more believable. And they will experience sabotage. They will start to develop a type of complex. Usually, I know I did it first. It affected my esteem. It affected my ego. It's designed for that. And the fact that these people are just getting away with this stuff, it fuels the fire. And the target moves farther into that place of mental instability. And the danger is that they will internalize all these things. The major effects are, well, paranoia. Of course, the sensitization leads targets into reading into their environment, which, of course, plays right into the gaslighting campaign. And along with, the covert cloak of plausible deniability that the perps have, it can be very frustrating, and it can fuel the sense of injustice of the target, moving them into a place of extreme paranoia, which, in my opinion, is justified for what they're dealing with. They will experience the environmental tyranny, and with the isolation and the deprivation, they can move into a place of propositional tyranny and irrational paranoia. And I've talked about that before, that targets are, depending on what you're dealing with, you can be chased around. And I know I've experienced that, where, you think, you kind of got, especially in the beginning, you think you're just playing this little game or whatever, and you have no idea how far this is going to go. Not only the duration of the gangstalking, but just the onslaught of harassment, where people are literally just, on your heels, or, the environmental tyranny of the demonic hive, or the individuals that have been hired to follow and harass the target. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. But, there's just no rest for the target. In other words, the irrational paranoia is similar to what I've talked about when you move into, the definition of unwarranted suspicion that plays into the disinformation the target deals with, they just look crazy. I mean, when they try to get help or they try to explain this, and they describe the type of tyranny that they're dealing with, it's just doesn't seem possible for someone to deal with that kind of hounding, to be hunted down at that level, to be followed wherever they go, to experience surveillance and constant harassment, to the place where they're taken into a place where they can't find rest. There's no relaxation. There's no letting up. There doesn't seem to be anyone they can trust. Excuse me. They might leave their house for a very short period of time, and it doesn't matter. They can't leave. It's like they're waiting. It's like they know, and they'll get in there, or they might follow the target around, and they just get out of their vehicle for a short period of time, and they get in there. They'll play with you that way, and it's designed to get that hypervigilance. It's designed to create that atmosphere, and I think I mentioned it in the last live stream. It's almost like dealing with ninjas, because it's crazy. The stuff that you have to deal with. I mean, targets experience higher forms of harassment that they just find no rest, and the onslaught for the first 2 to 3 years is usually the worst for the target, but it can go on a lot longer than that, and it can follow different breaks and patterns to solidify the gaslighting. but there's that onslaught to where they might be dealing with things literally 24 hours a day for years. Other targets talk about the 2 weeks where they are hunted down relentlessly to the point where they start to consider suicide. And I've even heard targets talk about that. People talk about hearing voices, or running to the hotel, or just going out on the run or whatever. And there was a guy that he experienced that many times. The target will be chased out of their geographical location, and they'll be taken into a place of dysregulation and destabilization. But when they try to find rest, of course, they're just going to be hunted down. And this guy was telling me that he was just stressed. He was dealing with all kinds of physical sequelae, anxiety, panic. It was almost like he was drugged. And, it seemed as though no matter where he went, it was like, and I've heard a lot of targets talk about this, the voices and stuff like that, not only that people will hear in their minds, but also in their environment. And he was talking about the fact that he could hear people talking outside the hotel room. Of course, he went on the run, and he swears it was his boss and some of the coworkers. And I've heard a lot of targets talk about that. They think that some of the V2K or the other environmental stimuli that they're dealing with is certain individuals, like the V2K has employed maybe one of their ex-girlfriends or something, or maybe a coworker or a boss or an aunt or an uncle or whatever, and it's their voice that seems to be tormenting them, maybe outside the window, maybe like that guy, he was in the hotel, and he's trying to he was drinking beer, just basically trying to gain any type of peace or relaxation. I think he was on like a bender, but he didn't know what else to do. I mean, he's having symptoms of anxiety to the point where he feels like he's going to have a heart attack. I'm speculating that he probably was covertly drugged along with all this stuff, with some of the things that he was talking about. But you hear that from targets, that they think it's somehow maybe the neural monitoring or the technological attack that they're dealing with. Somehow they've got their family involved, or their girlfriend, or their coworkers, or their boss, or maybe some neighbors or something. And it seems like, I think it's a trick. I don't know. You could pull that stuff off technologically, and I know that demons can do that stuff because we have a lot of evidence that they will pretend like they're, maybe your friends that have passed on, or relatives that have gone to the other side. And the Bible verse that would refute those things would be, let me see, that's um well, it's I know it. I'm pretty sure it's Hebrews 9:27. Sorry about that. And that is once a person dies, they go to judgment. And but for the mediums and the soothsayers and the channelers and people who get involved in that, and in witchcraft stuff, a lot of times they will do that. They will try to channel people that have gone to the other side, and they'll have that kind of manifestation where people think they're talking to their dead grandma, or they'll even possess the body of the channeler, and they will know things that only those people would know. The little grasshopper that the individual caught with their grandmother when they were a little kid or something like that, and they didn't tell anybody about that. How could the medium know? How could they understand? Well, the spiritual dimension knows those things. They understand that, and they could play those games, whether they are mimicking their voice or coming up with that type of information to trick the individual. But that guy was talking about how it was so intense that he was going to hang himself in the hotel, and all of a sudden he could hear him talking, through the walls. A lot of targets will talk about that phenomena. Sometimes, not only will they be dealing with voices, demonic stuff, or even voice to skull technology, but they'll experience that type of tyranny. People will be outside their window, outside their door. They might be, in an apartment or some type of scenario where they can hear them yelling or whatever, or even making threats, or yelling into the forced air vents, and they can hear the voices coming up through the ventilation, and so on and so forth. So they were betting, well, I don't know, he's not going to do it, and this guy was going to do it, and he was really thinking about it. And then he started hearing them talking about, yeah, it looks like he's getting ready. And it's just weird, the onslaught that targets will deal with, and it pushes them into a place not only of that type of extreme paranoia, but irrational paranoia, to the point where they start to panic, and it can drive them into either homicide or suicide. But in order to get them to that point where they feel hopeless and surrounded, and some of the stuff out there is just false, though. That's when you get into the gaslighting. But the plausible deniability is a factor that can't be ignored. And I've mentioned before, for people who are skeptical, a lot of targets talk about getting gang stalked in church or other places, different establishments or social gatherings. And they had what they called the machine of the Lutheran Synod, and I've talked about it before, basically gang stalking, rather than to deal with people in a way where they would use the political scenario or the authorities established in the Lutheran Missouri Synod to control the balance of power, and to kind of, I don't know, govern that body. They would use covert harassment, right? And it was really, in fact, it's a good read if you want to go in and look at it. It's a documented case of gangstalking. To me, it's a type of microcosmic picture of what's everywhere. I mean that they did the whole investigation on that, but if you really want my opinion, I think it's everywhere. I think that if you wanted to take that into the realistic area that targeted individuals deal with, that machine that was in the Lutheran set, that was just a manifestation of what's everywhere, in my opinion. That was just something that they may have not, been aware of the fact that that can be activated against, targeted individuals on an exponential level, right? You don't have to be involved in the Lutheran Missouri Synod to experience the machine. You just be a human being on the planet. And it's similar to all the stuff that targets deal with. That's why I say that they were dealing. I mean, they would use all the techniques that targets deal with. They would sensitize them. They would use psychological tactics against them. They would gaslight them. They would get them apprehensive, get them in a place where they were questioning themselves, and basically use that plausible deniability to cloak the whole thing, and sometimes either drive them crazy or, if nothing else, make everybody think they were nuts, right? Just drive them out. Just harass them to the point where they're either, blackballed and discredited, or they just run for their lives. And targets deal with that whole thing. And as one of the things that I noticed the other day is, I was talking about the Mandela effect, and a lot of people have come to different conclusions concerning the Mandela effect. That we're in a different timeline, and the government has technology, and they want you to believe that kind of thing. And there's more stuff going on with that too. And in my opinion, stuff like that is used to control people and experiment on the public at large. And I think it's also, even more than that, the multi-purpose of a type of disinformation psyop, in the sense that it's almost like they want our enemies around the world, other foreign countries and powers, to buy into that whole thing too, to believe that they have the power of mind control and all this other stuff, along with time travel and going back and just changing the past, or going into the future. They want people to believe that stuff. Some of the stuff that's involved in the alien mythos out there, which I think a lot of that stuff is just demonic. I think that's part of a psyop too. And I heard some stuff like that from a guy that I used to know work up at an Air Force base that was my boss for a number of years. And he hinted around that that was more of a way to get Russia and other foreign powers to spend their money looking for something that wasn't there. But it really is the pinnacle of gaslighting when you can get somebody to believe something like that, and set them up and use that type of environmental tyranny and disinformation to completely put them in a state of propositional tyranny. It's the same thing. And I've mentioned before that when you look at MK Ultra and other programs, that it was very aggressive what they did with drugs and violent material and sexual material and psychic driving and all that stuff, and sleep deprivation. But really, the public at large started to experience those things right about the same time, with the proliferation of drugs, LSD, and violent and sexual stuff in Hollywood. Okay, it was all kind of launched at around the same time, and then it became very intense during the 70s, and Hollywood really changed. But that's what is done. I think in a lot of ways, when you look at what happens to targets or people in MK Ultra, you're just a real aggressive I don't know, like a little study or experiment of what they want to do in an exponential framework. They use the same type of strategy. They just do it incrementally because it's generational, and it indoctrinates people and creates disinformation and gaps between generations in order to keep the wisdom and that disinformation going, so that the wisdom of the elders doesn't get passed on to the children. They have destroyed the patriarchal family system, and with technology and other things to distract people, they have created generational gaps, and they have destroyed the cycle of wisdom and the perpetuation of immorality that we're looking at the results of that. We're looking at people who don't know what gender they are. We are looking at people who believe some of the stuff out there in the pseudoscience of psychiatry, which has been used as a weapon to discredit and gaslight people, to the point where now they believe they're victims, that they can never be healed, that they need to be on long-term medication, which is actually causing some of the sequelae, or even now that they just would be better off dead. This is really getting scary. I've mentioned that before. It's one thing to be gaslighted and discredited as a target, but when other people are starting to believe that you're mentally ill and need to be force medicated, and you get involved in that whole menagerie of gaslighting and dealing with the Borg, the demonic hive, and people slipping through the rabbit hole of death of gangstalking and experiencing that gaslighting and internalizing this whole thing, and then even now worse than experiencing the threat of being medicated or discredited or just isolated or whatever. Now people are just convinced that they'd be better off dead, that maybe there's just no solution for them after they've made money on these individuals, by switching their medications, and as they slip down that spiral of. And I'm not, like I said before, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not against psychiatry or psychology or even meds. I'm not against that. I'm against that pseudoscience that's out there that is basically a weaponized form of gaslighting for profit and to discredit people. That's what it is, and it all works together. But now you're dealing with that whole thing on a different level. Okay, so it's you can see the effects of this whole thing. You can see how it started off, how people were making money in psychiatry, and then it moved into the place where it started to indoctrinate people on different levels, and then they started going after the children. And now all the kids needed to be on drugs. And then it's like, well, why? What do they do? Well, they're talking in class. They're chewing bubble gum. They've got attention deficit disorder. We need to drug them up. We need to put them on speed. And then we see all these other things. And then we get to the place where, like I said, the wisdom is not passed down to the next generation, and we have that destruction of the patriarchal family system. We have the injection of immorality. We have that type of cultural Marxism, which basically amounts to nothing more than ideological possession. And the next thing you know, people don't know what gender they are. They are buying into straw man arguments. They are completely bewitched. And targeted individuals are an extreme example of what happens. And I would imagine that a lot of the experiments that are done on targets were for that reason, because they have to dysregulate people and break them down and get them to disassociate. And then they will use that process of regulation with the environmental stimuli to solidify the gaslighting. And I've talked about that before. You get into Occult or whatever, and people will be broken down. They will use the social structure. They will indoctrinate an individual, and then they will apply the positive reinforcement to solidify the proposition within the mind of the target. And it can be done technologically, it can be done demonically, it can be done socially, and it's all about psychological manipulation and environmental tyranny, gaslighting, and the plausible deniability that surrounds the whole thing is just the glue that keeps it from being uncovered, you know, along with fear and coercion and the social dynamics that keep it out there. It's a mechanism. You have that paranoia, the sensitization. You have that activation of the extreme paranoia. You have the environment, the demonic trauma associations, and the amalgamation that creates that exponential trigger effect in the target. And then you move into a place where the target is isolated, and they go into that spiral of extreme paranoia, irrational paranoia, and it moves them into a place where they can be disassociated and controlled. The whole idea is if you can do that more conveniently, incrementally, that you can get people to pretty much believe whatever you want. And when you deal with things like the Mandela effect, or this whole idea that the government is traveling through time or whatever and changing things, you gotta realize how they're doing this. It's a setup. It's similar to what targets are doing. You are set up. You are being set up. And a lot of people will go into this whole thing and they will say, well, you don't know, wait a minute, I've done research into this whole thing. And look, there's, this is different. And we learned this in school. And this is, you learned the wrong information. They set you up from the beginning. It's similar to the different movie versions and all those things out there that play into the Mandela effect. And then they just play that little, game of hypnosis and distraction. And then, people are, just kind of bebopping along and they throw it at you and they get you to believe all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay. It's an illusion. It's gaslighting 101. And it doesn't start, with the information out there that's accurate now when people are trying to fact check. It starts with the disinformation. And I've talked about that before. As a targeted individual, the framework you are given as a child, as you are growing up in this world, is false. Okay, it's an illusion. And a lot of the expectations and things that you have on your plate that you are led to believe are possible or that you are led to believe are real are nothing more than it's a setup. It's a campaign to indoctrinate you, and then at their leisure, they can throw you into this mechanism and flip your reality upside down, and they can control the population with the compartmentalization of this whole thing, and they can turn your life into a nightmare, and people don't see it, and the individuals involved just get away with it. That's the setup, and it's gaslighting 101. I'm going to go into the comments and see who's out there. Gangstalking Clips, welcome to the live stream. M1MG, NG, sorry about that. Oh, On Average Joe, welcome to the live stream. Okay, I'm not going to erase any comments if possible. I'm trying to adjust the size of this. Okay, well, I'm going to go into this a little further. I was reading something. Firefighter, welcome to the live stream. Elijah, welcome to the live stream. And thanks for joining our Facebook harassment 911. Bora Bora, welcome. Welcome to the live stream. And let's see. Eric Anthony, welcome to the live stream. And I'm going to go back up and see. I'm sure I've missed quite a few people. And let's see. Angels Are Real, welcome to the live stream. Okay, all right. Well, there's a lot of theories running around out there, different dimensions and all these different things. And you got to remember that the creation is made up of, at least in the biblical framework, three different heavens, which you could, I guess, change the wording to dimensions. Okay. In fact, I made a video called Multi-Dimensional Gangstalking, and it's kind of like, I don't know, a mix between how a lot of this stuff works and dynamic omniscience, which, if you want to look into that video, probably help explain the way some of these things are happening. But at any rate, the whole idea of different dimensions is not, it's not wrong. There are, but the thing is that you got to be careful how how you're processing that information. That's where the gaslighting comes in. That's, it's like the clairvoyant street theater and some of the possible illusions that targets are dealing with. It's like I've talked about this before, because you deal with the perps that for everything that you're experiencing, they might as well be reading your mind, depending on what you're dealing with as a target. Not everybody's dealing with that. But if you're one of those people out there, right, and you're processing the information critically, it certainly seems like it. And there are other possibilities, though. Okay, and I've mentioned that, when you get into different dimensions, this is the space-time physical dimension, okay, that we are in now. Okay, and in that, there is the possibility of things, hypothetically, like time dilation or whatever. And that's my guess, and I don't know everything, of how, the angelic realm or whatever, how they are able to give prophecy. And God, he knows things according to his perspective, right? Maybe he knows it, and maybe he does not need that type of dimensional perspective. I don't know. That could be. But when you read verses like God regretted that he made man on the earth or whatever, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? So in that theory, God would have created everything, and then he would have had the ability to look into the future after it was created, and then navigate exactly what he was going to do about that in his sovereignty and ruling over it. Okay, that's just as hypothetical. Okay, but it would make sense, wouldn't it? Because if God knew what was going to happen, how could he regret it? Okay, stuff like that, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? And how do you explain it? Well, that'd be a good way to explain it, right? He had this plan. He knew that his creation would be subjected to weakness, and he knew that there was going to be a need for a savior. He knew all these things, but he may have not known the specifics of exactly what was going to happen, because there are plenty of instances in the scriptures where God was just so grieved at something, and he talked about that with the Israelites, that it never even entered into his mind that they would be engaged in child sacrifice. Never entered into his mind that even that. But of course, the depravity of man, and all the things that happened in the fall and everything. Maybe he didn't think it was going to go that far. It's speculation. That's all it is. But it would seem to be a reasonable answer, rather than to have that type of deterministic view of God, to where he just knows everything all the time, and he's just communicating with us, and the words don't really mean what they mean. Okay, that's okay. Now you're moving into a place where nothing makes sense, and you can't do that. But getting back to the point is that if that were possible, and there was a dimensional perspective involved, not only in the three heavens, but also that, when targeted individuals are attacked, and it seems like people are reading your mind, maybe they are connected with the demonic or the spiritual dimension at that point. And that happens, by the way. It's not all technology that, they're going to know, because they have had that type of preview. I talked about that when it comes to deja vu. How is that possible? And I'm not talking about, oh, we've had nachos before, deja vu. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when people have dreams of what is going to happen, and it does, maybe even years in advance, or remote viewing, or intense deja vu where you know what someone is going to say. How does that work? Well, in my opinion, and it's just a guess, that's a pre-download from a dimensional perspective, and it is used to manipulate people and get them to believe all kinds of things. Once again, gaslighting to propositional tyranny. I'm a prophet. I've got a special gift. I'm a special person. I have magical powers. No, you got a pre-download from a place that has information that you don't. And it really has nothing to do with you. You're just a human being, which is nothing more than cosmic clay. And the significance of all this stuff, even when you get into the mind control and the subjection that we have as these little, creatures, is that, we submit to either God or the kingdom of darkness. Because, people talk about free will, or they talk about all this. Well, look at all the manipulation. Look at all this stuff. How could anybody? It doesn't seem significant. Well, after the individual submits or whatever, well, no, at that point, they are being manipulated. At that point, there is a lot of coercion, but the choice to submit is important. And I've talked about that before. When you get into looking at some of the things that happen to people, whether they become addicted to drugs, or they have different sexual perversions, or they have identity problems sexually, or other things happen to them. And some of the people out there have created different doctrines of reprobation, but they're just beyond. That God has given them over. They're gonna go to hell. Well, okay, hold on a minute, because there's a huge list involved in that stuff. But what's the good news is that if they submit to God, He can deliver them from any of it. And I've talked about that before. When you deal with this whole scenario involved in gangstalking, that you can get taken to the place where you think it's over. There's just no way this is good. There's no way I can come back. I'm traumatized to the point where I'm never going to be the same. I'm never going to be able to heal. I'm never going to be able to love. I'm never going to be able to trust people again. I'm paranoid. I'm gone. I'm insane. They've won. No, they haven't. Okay. And why? Because God can fix that stuff very quickly. Okay. He has that power. And no matter what, it's like a circuit board. I mean, it's the electricity can be channeled and directed. Okay. And, just as God can resurrect people from the dead, or even create an eyeball out of, saliva and dirt, He can fix you. Or even a better example would be the demoniac. And that guy was possessed by, many different malevolent spiritual entities, running around naked, cutting himself, living in a graveyard, and a few seconds with the Lord, and he's in his right mind, and he wants to be an apostle. Now that would seem impossible, but not with God. Okay, and it's something to remember. But getting back to the point, when people start coming to these conclusions and they get into that type of propositional tyranny based on the environmental stimuli, subjection, and psychological manipulation, that's the key. Okay, that's where you have to be careful. That's when targets are taken to that place of heavy gaslighting, and they start believing they're in a simulation or whatever. And I sympathize. Sometimes I really wonder about that stuff too. Maybe this is even hell. I don't know. It doesn't seem possible to deal with this. But like I said, that's the framework. That's the information of indoctrination that comes at you to create that type of conceptual framework to where it just doesn't seem possible. That's the blinding and bewitching effect that is basically over the people out there that don't know about this whole thing, and they just look at you like you're crazy, right? And they believe the lies and the mythos of the false stuff involved in the weaponized psychiatry and other things. Okay. M1NG says they use black magic, dark arts, and sorcery, witchcraft when they stalk you. Okay, well, that's part of the framework of a lot of people, probably more so in certain areas and in certain time frames. There's people that are still doing that stuff. It was real heavy when I started to experience this, but the thing that I noticed is that a lot of that is smoke and mirrors, okay? In the sense, I'm not saying it's not real. Okay, that stuff is absolutely real, but not in the way that people believe. Because human beings are just the little puppets, and they become involved in that stuff, and they are bewitched by the spiritual entities, and they are tricked into engaging in this stuff, and the culpability that goes along with that makes them their prisoners. So they kind of own those people. It's a type of propositional tyranny that they are under, that they believe they have powers and that they can cast spells. But it seems real, though, right? Why? Because the demons are doing that stuff. So in other words, really what's going on is it's an illusion in the sense that they use those puppets to come after you and get you to believe that it's the witchcraft or the people. Similar to the stuff I was talking about earlier, when you think your ex-girlfriend is the one doing the V2K, or that your neighbors are the ones talking to you or whatever, and it might not have anything to do with that. That's the illusion, right? And really behind the scenes, you're dealing with something that's either demon technology or just demonic. And they will play that because people don't have spiritual fingers. It looks like it, because I've dealt with that stuff too. They would come over and, we put something in your house, or you're going to find it later, or, we have the gateway and the porthole for our, remote viewing into your house. And then all the stuff that targets deal with now is usually equated to a type of technological framework of neural monitoring and whatever. But, the whole idea of them looking through your eyes with technology and everything. But before, when I was dealing with it, they sold me the same kind of baloney. The only difference is that it was all witchcraft, right? So they were using spells and whatever, and, collecting hair out of your house. And then, it would seem real, but really it's just the demonic realm attacking you. That's what I believe anyway. And, they will follow that pattern and that framework so that people are sucked into it. Because now, rather than drawing near to God, they got to go find some kind of guru, or, find some type of antidote, or burn the sweet grass, or, visit the shaman, or to, find some kind of witch doctor, or do some kind of thing, or, get the guru to cast the demon out of their house, or throw some holy water on their bed, or, put some type of artifact or something like that was owned by some old Catholic saint, and put it in the, it is just, it just moves them into a different area of propositional tyranny. Okay. And you got to be careful of that. So, while people are involved in those things, even in the secret societies, and I've talked about that before, really it's more of a delusion. And it's similar to the Freemason thing or the Rosicrucian thing. Those things are real. Okay. But what is it though? Ultimately, when you just break that stuff down, it's just people being deceived by demons. They're being deceived. They are in a state of propositional tyranny. And even though those fraternities are real and the evil stuff they're doing is real, they're deceived. They're just being puppeted around. And, some of the conclusions and some of the propositions, not only that they believe, but the people who are subjected to their witchery believe are just false. And they're dealing with demonic psychological manipulation, gaslighting 101. Okay, let's see what else is out here. All right. John, welcome to the live stream. Rise to Power. We have a moderator. Welcome to the live stream. All right, I'm going to go all the way up to the top here. Okay, let's see. Lisa Grant, welcome to the live stream. Chris, welcome to the live stream. If I accidentally miss one of you guys, I certainly apologize. What do you think of Father Malachi Martin, says Lisa Grant. Well, he did a lot of work on the spiritual dimension, and he uncovered some corruption involved in the Catholic Church, I do believe, and he ended up kind of playing a little game there, not to get into this too deeply. But I believe that there's a lot of things involved in their theology that are demonic. And I'm not trying to offend anyone. I've met a lot of good people that are Catholics. Okay. Nothing wrong with the people. Okay. But the hermeneutic that is involved violates scripture directly. And a lot of people will criticize, especially the Catholic Church, because there was a lot of corruption and sexual molestation and other things involved. And people have talked a lot about that. But here's the thing, okay? And this is really how a lot of that stuff happens. You create a type of creedal statement of faith or a hermeneutic or a system of beliefs or rules that are unbiblical, and those effects are exponential. And in 1 Peter 2:4, I do believe that's the scripture. I could be wrong. It talks about, 1 Peter 4:3, it talks about not, it talks about people moving into different heresies. And Paul said that when he was going to leave, that the wolves would creep in and not spare the flock, and that they would introduce doctrines of demons, and that they would forbid people to marry or to eat meat or to do other things. Okay, well, think about just that right there. Okay, when they make people take a vow of celibacy, what happens if they're not? What does the Bible say about that, by the way? That if you do not have the gift, it's a gift of celibacy, that you should marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust, right? And I think that's, what is that, 1 Corinthians chapter 6? I can't remember. Pretty clear. What's the biblical solution for somebody who does not have the gift of celibacy? To get married, right? Targeted individuals are, you're subjected to a little bit more of a difficult scenario there, though, because you're kind of being hindered in that way. And, you pray to God about that, and you just kind of, deal with it as best you can. But, these people they're engaging in believing in that, right? And they're doing it. Well, it's a direct violation of scripture. And then what happens? Well, these people that become priests or they become involved in the ministry that have taken the vow of celibacy, they end up getting weird because they don't get married, and then they don't have the gift of celibacy, right? And then you have all kinds of weird stuff happen. What about not eating meat and stuff like that? That's the same thing when you get into some of the things that are involved out there, and it's like that all over the place. So when you get into the different Catholics and stuff, you got to be careful. Like I said, he did a lot of work. And I think exorcisms and stuff like that too. I'd have to look into it a little deeper. But you cannot violate the truth and say that you are standing for it. Okay, that's the problem with false doctrine. And when you see a lot of the things involved in exorcisms, especially in the Catholic Church, you have holy water. You have all kinds of incantations. You have, different things involved that have, trinkets and all these weird things. And in my opinion, they're being deluded. I think that the demonic realm is playing games with them, and they have bought into that. Okay. And, really, though, when you look at some of the exorcism activity involved, it's not like the movies that, because, usually people will think that some of that stuff is accurate as far as the Catholic exorcisms, but a lot of it involves multiple therapy sessions, and people are subjected to the Word of God, and they experience a deliverance incrementally. Okay, so it's important to realize that when the Catholic Church does an exorcism, they usually don't. It's not like the movies where this demon gets cast out usually, and they're a real intense manifestation, and the whole thing is just lasts for like a couple days or a week or whatever. Usually, people experience deliverance over like 100 different therapy sessions with these people. But the thing to take away from it is that when you draw near to God, he draws near to you. So the solution, rather than to be trying to fight with demons or whatever, is that you use truth, and you use the Word of God, and you expose someone to that environment, hopefully the Holy Spirit, and the demon will eventually leave or be cast out. Like I said, I'm not an exorcist, but when I look at a lot of the things that happened in the Bible, especially when you get into when Jesus sent out the 72 after the incident over at Mount Hermon, where he said, I'm gonna build my church, and the gates of hell, upon this rock, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, right? And of course, a lot of people will say, well, that was Peter, right? Well, that's a play on words. Christ is the rock, okay? The revelation of him, and the fact that they were in that area, supposedly where the Watchers fell, which would be Mount Hermon, which was in that time was the area of Bashan, which was considered like the gates of hell, literally. So it was almost like Jesus was picking a fight. But when he went out and sent out the 72 disciples apart from the 12 apostles, they had that power over the enemy, right? And that's where a lot of people will get the scriptures about the demonic stuff, where people will be casting out demons or whatever. We have the power to trample on snakes and scorpions, but those people ended up defecting. But you have to understand Psalm 82 in the sense that was a type of divine infiltration. And that Jesus said, declare the kingdom of God is at hand. What's that? That in Psalm 82, the rebellious principalities or angelic realm were judged. Evidently, their mortality was revoked. And it talked about the fact that they would end up dying like men, right? Why would you say that to a human? You wouldn't. You don't tell a human, you're going to die like a human, right? That doesn't make sense. And that there was an injustice going on, and that God would rise up and take back the nations. Well, that was the whole idea of what Abraham accomplished, and that he was elected to bring forth the Christ, and the Christ would come out of his lineage, and that the prophecies that were obfuscated about Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, Emmanuel, God with us, right? And all those things, when you get into the split of the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes, that's really when you get into what the synagogue of Satan was, is they went into heresies, they changed the calendar, and it was basically the first manifestation of the Antichrist. But the point is that God was taking back the nations, and when he showed up on the scene, he was sending out notice on what? On the territorial spirits, on the principalities and powers that were ruling over the world. It's a type of infiltration into the cosmic geography when the nations were divided up after the Tower of Babel. It was like when David used to get chased around by Saul, and people said, well, go sacrifice to another god. And David said, well, yeah, I'm going to be chased out of my inheritance. What was he talking about? He was talking about the geographical, cosmic geography of the Hebrews, right? It's similar to what happened to Daniel when Michael the archangel had to help the angel that came to him because there was other principalities and powers fighting them, right? You had the cosmic geography, you got stuff like that going on out there. But the 72, they went out and they were given that power from Christ, and they were casting out demons and stuff like that, and people were getting healed and everything. And then they came back to Jesus and said, even the spirits are subject to us. And he tried to emphasize to them, well, I'm the one that sent you out there. I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. But of course, they didn't catch on. And he gave them a hard saying. And he said, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can't have any part of me. Of course, he was referring to the communion and so on and so forth. Well, they didn't know that. And they walked away, right? But, that's really, when you get into the infiltration and, the gospel of Christ, is that, through the gospel and through people accepting the gospel, they can be set free and delivered. You don't necessarily have to, go out and start, challenging demons or casting demons out of people all the time. Is that they need to be grounded in the gospel, in the word of God, and they need to be consistent and drawn near to God. It's like some of the targets out there that are dealing with different attacks and stuff, they wander away and they get involved in something and then they get attacked. In fact, I was just talking to a guy last night that he was, dealing with that, and he has an addiction issue, and what happens when he goes out there and he gets attacked, and he gets attacked heavily, right? Why? Because he's stepping out of that circle of protection, right? And I've talked about that before. When it comes to living your life as a target, you got to be real careful who you're around and what you're doing, right? Why? Because this ultimately is a spiritual battle. Yeah, there's programs. Yeah, there's all kinds of things going on, like MK Ultra and other secret programs and everything else. But there's a spiritual war going on. But like I said before, I'd have to do a deep dive into Malachi Martin. And I know he's done some work on that, but ultimately you have to be careful of those things. And some of the theologies that are promoted by these religious organizations are simply false. Okay, and what else do we got out there? Okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, let's see here. And firefighter says the government corrupted all the churches. They are public control operations. Not all, but most. Yeah, there. It's like what I was talking about earlier. You are dealing with the machine, and it's literally everywhere. It's like that example of the Lutheran Synod and how people can be subjected to that form of harassment. But it's everywhere, man. And targets get that. They're dealing with attacks exponentially wherever they go. There is a machine out there that involves a hierarchy. Okay, and I've talked about that before, and I've gone into how that works, and who these people are, and how all that stuff is broken down. And it's important to realize how that stuff works. In fact, I've mentioned that several times when it comes to breaking down the spiritual dimension, is that you have a lot of people involved, and if you don't understand the hierarchy, you're in trouble. Then it goes into different areas of the secret societies and the government and everything. And there's a framework out there. There is. You have, programs, CIA, MK Ultra, the COINTELPRO. You've got, organized stalking. You've got cognitive warfare, multi-domain warfare. You've got counterterrorism. You've got enslavement through trauma-based mind control programs. You've got terrorist screening. You've got contract stalking and people who are assassinating individuals and discrediting whistleblowers. You've got the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the DHS, the DOD, NATO. You've got the occult, right? You've got, everything involved in witchcraft. You've got the Freemasons. You've got the Illuminati, the Rosicrucianism, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, the royal families. And it's not, and when people talk about the Freemasons, they're not in charge of gangstalking. They're just people who are, some of them don't even know anything about that stuff. Some of them are just individuals who are trying to get, involved in the infrastructure of their community. They don't know, right? And it's the same with all those other fraternities. It's a little different in some of them, and it becomes more corrupt and in depth, especially when you get into the higher levels of Freemasonry. Those guys, they know more, and they are subjected to spiritual manipulation. And so, because it's when targets will say, well, I know these Freemasons are doing, well, they probably are. Why? Because they can be manipulated, because their spiritual handlers are manipulating them. It doesn't mean that they're in charge of gang stalking. And you have to understand that framework that's out there. And, what is it? It's a machine. It's a cabal. It moves into the fraternities, the good old boy societies, the social dynamics, the churches, all that stuff. And they infiltrate. The occult infiltrates the churches. The demonic entities and the demonic doctrines were prophesied to infiltrate the church, not sparing the flock. Okay? And I've dealt with it. I've dealt with heavy gang stalking in the church. And you can look at the doctrines that are out there. I could go into that, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I can prove what's wrong and what's right. And how do we know? We have the moral obligation of studying the Word of God and understanding the truth. Okay, and it's something that everybody has on their plate. Whether they're doing that or not is something else. But what happens is, people will get indoctrinated and they'll get regulated and they'll just start believing things because it seems like it's working. And you get in there as a target, and maybe this is even part of why you're being attacked as a target individual, because you're just not buying into a lot of that stuff, right? Or they will use you as a vessel of wrath. I go to a church like that, whether it's a Reformed church or maybe something else, something that is holding to a cognitive dissonant, unbiblical doctrine of soteriology or something else, and they're not going to like me. I'm nothing but a problem for them, and they get rid of me. You can't play games with somebody who knows what's going on. I don't know everything, but I know that they're wrong. I didn't used to know that. Okay, it's like a lot of the false teachers that are out there. They're making money. They're working for the enemy. And in God's genius, he is able to use all those things because he's not relying on human beings. He's relying on the foolishness of preaching the gospel to save them that which believe, and faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And by gosh, you have the responsibility to know the truth and to mine that out. And in a multitude of teachers, there is wisdom, right? You got to search for it. You've got to want it. You have to be diligent, and you're going to be set free. Why? Because you know the truth. You're not going to be given over to that propositional tyranny. But they have invaded, and I've experienced a lot of that. Mrs. Matson Miles, welcome to the live stream. Andy Smith, welcome to the live stream. And Andy Smith says Freemasonry gang stalking is called the white glove treatment. Interesting. Well, there's all kinds of people that become involved in this. Okay. It looks like Bora Bora doesn't want me to read her comments out loud. Okay. And then it'll be like a permanent record. It's okay for the people in the live stream to see it, but not everybody else. That was kind of cute. Okay, well, that's fine. All righty. Well, I do have to get to work tomorrow, and I've been trying to get my throat to heal, and I'm going to have to probably cut this short here. I think I'm going to read one more comment, though. And firefighters got something interesting here. They can stop your emails, stop your receiving emails, erase important texts, and use tech to pretend to be other people, text you, and create all kinds of problems. Lots of ways to. I agree with that. The technological aspect of gangstalking is beyond. They will hack your phone. They will do all kinds of things. It's horrific. And I've heard a lot of targets talk about that too. That they feel like they're being watched all the time. And I guess the takeaway from it is that ultimately God is always watching. And so I guess some of that's obviously propositional tyranny, because they want you to believe that. But sometimes targets are being watched and they're being observed. But the key is how. How is that happening? Right? And a lot of that is where you get the disinformation. And some of it is there to cause paranoia and agoraphobia in targeted individuals and cause a type of glitch in their mind. And it's similar to the innuendos and the mind reading and all that stuff that targets deal with, is that, it's something that short circuits the way that you process information, communicate, and function. It's when a target gets attacked with an innuendo, usually it pricks their ego. And so now they're looking for hidden meanings in a conversation, and it's exhausting. It's hard for you to keep up with a rational form of communicating with someone if you're always trying to figure out what they're saying and they're not saying it. And they know that. And it's also really good to sensitize people to keywords and phrases and get them reading into things so they can be gaslighted and, attack people that have nothing to do with gangstalking, or just believe things that are false and start reading into it and trigger you all the more, right? But, the whole idea is to get the target in that place where they're glitched out. And if you're thinking that everybody's reading your mind and you become paranoid or anxious, and then you deal with an attack on top of that and you're trying to function, man, you're going to, you'll probably start thinking all kinds of weird stuff, right? Don't think of pink elephants. Oh my gosh, it's too late, And then, you got somebody who's messing with you along with it. And then you got a hive or something, or you got one of those weird, deals where it seems like everybody in the room is in on it. And the target just freaks out. They start to panic. They start to have that vertigo. They start to feel, like, they just can't go anywhere. And it's like, now you're moving into that place where, the whole idea of people watching you and monitoring you has gone into a place of ultimate tyrannical tyranny. You can't think. You can't do anything. You can't go to the bathroom. You can't, and then they'll get you into the place where you're engaged in self-scrutiny. It's like you've got to agree with them now, or you're answering people that aren't there. And that happens because of the isolation. You're experiencing the deprivation. You have the tyranny of all these propositions in your mind. And the next thing you know, you're one of those people walking down the street talking to yourself or yelling in a room with no one in it but you. It's horrifying. And you have to be careful. In fact, I was talking to a target the other night. It's just like you get into those conversations with these things, or even in your own mind with those intrusive thoughts. And it's like, you got to break the cycle. You have to distract yourself and move yourself into a place where you're trying to focus on something rather than getting into that rut, rather than engaging in that type of narrative in your mind. In fact, I mentioned that to a girl that I used to talk to. I was like, you got a demonic narrative that's you're saying I'm demonic. I said, no. I said, there's a demonic narrative that's coming into your mind. you know, and it comes in, and it's like yeast. They want to infect your mind. It's very similar to all the other stuff that target individuals are dealing with. It's an invasion. They invade your psyche. They invade your thought life. They invade, what you consider real or not, your propositions, and they put you into a place where that stuff is just bouncing around in your head, and you have to distract yourself. You have to break free. You have to pray to God and seek Christ for deliverance, because ultimately the significance of the tyranny that you're dealing with is who you submit to and who you go to for help. Right? Like I said, ultimately, and I've talked about this many times, ultimately we are headed for judgment, and we're going to be processed, and we're either going to go to heaven or hell. And even when you get into the significance of the conformity of this world, there's going to be a heavy price for the people who are doing this stuff to you. When you get into the mark of the beast, which in my opinion is more of a Middle Eastern phenomena, and it is going to have to do with cosmic geography and false signs and wonders to the Jewish people before Jesus returns. And even though it says all are going to have to get the mark, it doesn't mean all without exception. It's talking about whether you're rich or you're a slave or whatever. It's not talking about people in Papua New Guinea or Eskimos and all that stuff, in my opinion. You can agree to disagree on that one. But what does it say about people who conform to that whole thing? Well, they're going to be tormented, in ways that are beyond, because they conform to that. But if I'm right about that, they're going to give into those false signs and miracles, and they're going to move away from the God of Israel, or they're going to give into that coercion and that cabal over there in the Middle East, that final eighth head of the dragon, or the reforming of the Ottoman Empire, and they're going to be subject to that tyranny, and they're going to pay a heavy price for that. But they were deceived, right? What about the people here in the West? There's a church on every corner, right? People know about Jesus, and they're not being deceived by false miracles and signs and wonders of Allah or something like that. They're literally joining Satan, right? They know about Jesus. I've talked to some of these people that are involved in stalking, and they admitted to me what was going on. They weren't deceived by some kind of false sign or miracle. They literally just went along with the devil. They know what they're doing. It's going to be, in my opinion, it might be a lot worse for them than it would be for the people who even take the mark of the beast. And think about that for a minute, guys. I mean, it's beyond. And, that's the kind of wickedness that we're dealing with over here in the West. We were, very instrumental in the gospel being spread to the nations. And the people who were in charge, like we talked about earlier with the false doctrines, they failed. They went after money and conformed to the religious community, and they did it for profit and living comfortable lives. And all this kind of garbage, came in, and ultimately, people just became disillusioned. You got all these charlatans and there can't be real. Look, God would have done something, but well, no. He's looking for people who believe the gospel in spite of the environmental tyranny, and they know how to be a discerner of the truth, and they can see the reality of this whole thing. But these people literally have gone over and done that. I think it's going to be worse, and you have to know the type of spiritual wickedness that you're dealing with over here in the West that is involved, even the secret societies, where you're dealing with that type of polytheistic mythos and framework. It's crazy. And it's evil. But you have to remember that we are in a spiritual battle. And I like to pray for all the targets out there who are experiencing the tyranny of gangstalking and that plausible deniability, and dealing with the gaslighting, whether they are believing lies or their mind has been invaded, or that they just believe they can't go on anymore and that it's over for them. I just would pray that they would experience a time of refreshing, and that they would experience the peace of God that transcends all understanding, that will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. This is a spiritual warfare. Even if you're dealing with a government program or whatever, you are still in the created order, and the created order is under the watchful eye of God and of Christ. And it's important to remember those things, that even though it doesn't always stop, that God is able to work these things out for your benefit. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming in here. And if you guys have any ideas for videos, or you have any prayer requests, hopefully I didn't miss any. I don't think I have. I've been pretty busy though. That I'd get to that, and I would address those things, maybe make a video or address it in a live stream, and we could even put those things up for the community in prayer, that this is a time for us to get together and experience affirmation. And it's a wonderful blessing. I'd also like to encourage people to like, share, and subscribe, and to get on Harassment Support Group 911 on Facebook. And remember, don't put any of your personal information in there. Just communicate with people in a way that it doesn't involve that type of sharing. And we'll eventually get some more stuff going on there. I think it's mostly just a place where I think there's around 40 people now. But I think I got that. I might be thinking about the other website or the other Facebook page. I've got a couple of them. But I would just encourage everybody to get out there. One of the things that I was excited about when I found the targeted individual community is to reach out to people where I can talk to you on a personal level. That's really the blessing. Live streams are good. I enjoy this, but I don't even know who's listening to me. It's something that we can all engage in, but I'd like to talk to you in person. And I'd like to thank everybody for your prayers. I've been dealing with a lot of spiritual stuff lately, and I would appreciate the prayers because it gets difficult. It happens on a daily basis. We are subjected to that tyranny and gaslighting all the time, and that sense of injustice has a tendency to build up. And we're weak. We're fleshly vessels, and we desperately need each other and the power of God to survive this onslaught, this gangstalking, this heinous activity. Guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.